So, my talk today in our prosperity series is the energy of lack. Now, if you've been around Science of Mind for a while, you may think, oh, what is she talking about? We don't talk about lack. That sounds like a negative talk title, doesn't it? Well, it's really not, because we're going to be talking about the sneaky little ways that our hidden beliefs and some of the things we say limit us, give energy to lack continuing in our life, hold lack in our lives. So we're going to be looking at that. Lack thinking is the opposite of living the amazing grace of prosperity, which is what we're talking about all month. October is our annual theme or annual series of prosperity every year. And this month it is the amazing grace of prosperity. As I was preparing this week, I found myself being very sensitive to conversations and actions and activities that were really expressions of lack. I was a little hypersensitive. You know, when you're working on something and everything just starts showing up that supports that, right? And that's sort of what happened. I just kept hearing and going, wow, that sounds like lack. That looks like lack. And I'll give you some examples. Eating food we don't like. Eating food we don't like or that's not well prepared. I'm guilty of that this week. Caught myself. That's a self-worth issue, isn't it? That's a self-worth issue. Or overeating because we were taught by our parents what? Clean your plate, right? We've all heard that. And many of us haven't healed that yet, so we have a tendency to overeat because of it. Or, and that's an old habit, inconsiderate drivers. I've really come to accept that that's a sense of lack of time, lack of a lane. They want my lane, right? Because there's not enough lanes. Lack of parking spots. Now, I was in Fry's parking lot on Friday morning, and I had taken my basket back, right? And I was coming back to my car, and there was a car stopped basically right in front of me, and it was an Audi, and it turned on its blinker to pull into a parking spot as someone was backing out. And as I crossed the drive aisle, another identical Audi pulled up behind this one and immediately went around it, blocking the person trying to back out so that they couldn't until that person. And I thought, now that's just funny. They completely blocked the flow of traffic by their impatience. If they'd have been patient and just waited, that person would have pulled in and they could have kept on going very easily. But it was just fascinating to me that two Audi drivers in the exact same model of Audi back to each other, and they behaved that way. It was just fascinating. Other examples happened in conversations where I heard things like, those people, right? Talking about how rude wealthy people treat people, right? Now, if I'm the universe, what I'm hearing is the person that said that is really not interested in any wealth in their life, because that means they'd be rude, and they don't want to be rude, right? So I'm the universe, and I go, okay, no wealth for that person. Got it. Right? So those are some of the things that we say and do, and the behaviors that are expressions of those hidden beliefs we may not be aware of, that are coming from some sort of a lack consciousness. Some sort of a lack consciousness. What's a hot topic right now? The economy. Oh my gosh. It's crashing. Right? The media is getting in the frenzy again. The headlines, the talk shows. I took the time on Friday to read a Time magazine article about the economy. It was written by a professor. It was an excerpt from his book. I think it was a whole chapter, because it went on and on and on and on and on and on about the history of the economy and how poorly government had run the economy in the 1970s. Remember? Yeah. And then all this other stuff. And then finally they whipped out their crystal ball and they said, and here's what's going to happen now. Oh my gosh. Fear, doom, and gloom. Now, I'm not a professor of economics, but in my 63 years on this planet, life is cyclical and our economy is cyclical. We may be headed for a little less robust time, but we'll get through it. It'll be okay, won't it? We will get through it. The important thing is not what's happening. The important thing is how we're dealing with it, right? It's how we're dealing with it. And that's why it's so important for us to be expanding our consciousness of prosperity so that we know that our source is God, not the economy, right? Our source is God. And when we know that, that fear begins to dissipate around those headlines. So those are just a few examples this past week that have gotten my attention. And what I've come to realize that these are bad habits of conversation and bad habits of action that we've accepted as a society. Ernest Holmes called it race consciousness, not politically correct today, but we call it maybe universal consciousness. It's just these behaviors that we've accepted, right? We'll probably hear friends and family starting to have conversations about the economy and what's happening and what we think is going to happen and how we should prepare and who's doing it wrong, right? We'll start to hear those conversations. How are we going to receive those? What are we going to say or do about those? Another area that we need to pay attention to is when someone is talking us off the ledge, right? And becomes all Pollyannish. It's okay. This will pass. We'll get through it. It'll be all right. Do you resent it? Do you push back? Do you think you don't know what you're talking about? You are not studied and read in this topic? Look at those resistances because those are typically indicative of some hidden belief about that topic and could be limiting you in your fullest expression of light and life and abundance. The spiritual principles of prosperity, and yes, there are spiritual principles of prosperity, they are the same creative process. They use the same creative process that all of the universal laws of creation use. And if you're familiar with some of the great prosperity teaching of Jesus, he had a lot of things to say about it. It is done as you believe. We teach that here in our centers. We reap what we sow. If we sow bountiful seed, we reap bountiful harvest. Those are all prosperity sayings, aren't they? One of the core ideas in the science of mind is the law of cause and effect. You've heard that, yes? The law of cause and effect. And that's what Jesus was talking about, right? Reap what you sow. Done as you believe. Ernest Holmes is the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living. He's also the author of The Science of Mind, and he says the law of cause and effect operates through this law of compensation to supply the equal of that which has been given. A couple weeks ago, we talked about mental equivalent. That's what he's talking about in the law of compensation. It is a vehicle for the divine circuit of life, God, and is linked up with the law of giving and receiving. As we give full expression to life in the giving of ourselves, so life returns to us in pouring forth its gifts to us through various channels. A lot of important ideas in there. One of the keys is to not limit the channels, right? We think our source is the stock market or our retirement check or the paychecks that we're getting, our jobs, and those are just channels, aren't they? And there's so many more. If we sat here this afternoon and spent 5 hours brainstorming every possible channel of good that we could, we'd probably come up with hundreds of thousands of them. And there's still bajillions, which is the biggest number I can think of, more. Because God's unlimited. In our finite minds, we have limited ideas of where it could come from and how it could work. Spirit's not limited in any way. So there are multiple channels, and it's important for us to keep those open. It was author Wayne Dyer who explained, when I chased after money, I never had enough. When I got my life on purpose and focused on giving of myself and everything that arrived into my life, then I was prosperous. Then I was prosperous. Zig Ziglar used to teach that when you help enough other people get what they want, you will achieve success as well. It's the giving, right? So what are we giving to life? What are we giving to life? Are we just taking from life, or are we giving to life as well? Lack is fed by the energy of attachment, hoarding, complaining, judging. And those thoughts and actions deny our birthright to the good of spirit that is ours already. Are we grateful when we receive a bill? Or do we groan? Oh dear, it's another bill. Mid-month's coming up, right? Oh dear. We're going to talk about gratitude and prosperity a little bit more next week. Another way that we energetically feed lack is chasing and desiring. And that's what Wayne was talking about when he said, when I chased after money, I never had enough. It's kind of like chasing after a piece of paper in a windstorm. You know, you just kind of keep doing this and trying to catch it, and you can't catch it. Yeah. Another way is that idea of desire. I want. And what we're doing is affirming it's not here. It's not here, right? Because if it was here, we would say it's here. And this is one of the most challenging parts of prosperity principles is gratitude in advance. Gratitude in advance, because our logical mind goes, it's not here. My sweetie, my house, my car, my money, it's not here. I'm struggling. There's not enough, right? In the realm of the physical. And then we tell you, be grateful in advance because it's already there. How does that work? How does that work? Well, we have to realize that it is already ours in spirit. We're not talking about physical, we're talking about spirit. And when we open that channel of gratitude in advance, we then begin to place ourselves into the realization of already having the experience of it. And that's the shift. That's the shift. That's the change. We are now with faith and acceptance and gratitude. Those energies is instead of the chasing and longing for and wishing for and hoping for and wanting and desiring. Faith, acceptance, and gratitude. We're expecting the good instead of missing the good, right? One of the last places that we want to play with prosperity principles is our money. It's going to talk about money. Oh my gosh. Yep, we're going to talk about money. Because we don't want to go there, right? But yet, how many times have we prayed for more flow? More money, more cash, higher return on investment, higher return on the sale of my house, lower interest rates. How many times have we prayed for these things in the financial realm in our lives, yet we don't want to talk about money in our prosperity principles? We have to. We have to, because we've got to make peace with it. We've got to recognize money is a spiritual principle. Money is a spiritual principle. And the paradox is the magic of generosity. Ernest said in his quote that the law of compensation is linked up with the law of giving and receiving. He didn't say receiving and giving, he said giving and receiving. It's a circle, a cycle, and we start it by giving. We give of ourselves to life, and life gives back to us. We can spiritually, in a spiritual center, we may call this idea of generosity tithing. Oh gosh, he's even going to talk about tithing. Oh my goodness. Wow. Why did I come today? Okay. But yeah, we are. We're going to talk about tithing because tithing is the spiritual principle of giving. We can call it donations. We can call it contributions. We can call it charitable. We can call it whatever we want. But when we're in the spiritual practice, it's tithing. It is tithing back 10% of your financial flow to your spiritual home. When we do that, amazing things begin to happen within our physical home, within our lives, within us. I know we have many committed tithers in the room today and online, and we appreciate you. I appreciate your spiritual depth of doing so. If I ask any one of them why they did it, I would probably get something along the lines of, it feels good. It feels good. My life flows better when I do. I know I feel that way. I started a tithing practice in 2000. It's 22 years ago. I started a very formal tithing practice. And I did it because it was when I was in a class, when my early studies of the science of mind, I was just figuring out what this stuff was all about. I knew I liked it. I enjoyed the center I was attending, but I really wanted to understand more. And so this class had a lesson on tithing. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take this. I'm going to do this as a challenge to myself to make peace with money. Because back then I was a mess with money. I was a mess with it. I didn't grow up with any. I didn't know anything about it. Now suddenly I was making a little, but I never seemed to have any. But yet here I was, and they're saying, if you give, you receive. You have a spiritual connection with this. Logically, it didn't make a darn bit of sense. You're telling me that the way that I improve my finances is through giving away money I don't really have? Are you people nuts? And you're not guilting me into it at all, like the other church used to. So I pondered this, and I took the challenge, and I said, yes, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to monitor this. And I did it for a couple of months. And I noticed that I was never short. I always had enough to take care of all of my needs. And then what I also began to notice was generosity in my life began to show up, both in mine and my receiving from others. And it just became this wheel that was self-propelling. As I gave, I received. As I gave, I received. And I made peace with money. I finally got that God is my source. Period. So when I got fired from a job, it was like, okay. It's scary, but okay. This or something better. This or something better. This is what begins to happen in us when we can lose our fear around money, when we can make peace with it, when we can make it a spiritual practice. This is what begins to happen for us. This is what begins to happen. Healing our relationship with money is absolutely a spiritual adventure. And it's the one that most of us put off to the last because it's the most scary. And I promise you, I am not trying to get into your wallets at all, okay? I know preachers have a bad reputation of that. And that's not what this is about. This is about a spiritual practice for you to make peace with your money. To make peace with your money. As I said, other side effects were this generosity that was birthed in me. The fear around money began to dissipate, and I gained power over my relationship with it. Money no longer controlled me. I controlled money. Yeah. I stopped running out of money before I ran out of month. You know? Anybody ever been there besides me? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So our job is not to limit the channels through which our good can flow. Ours is to limit that lack thinking, to change our words and our actions, and to be open to the amazing grace of abundance that already surrounds us. That already surrounds us. Many of us treat for good to come into our lives, whether it's in the wealth, health, relationships, or career. And the key to receiving is to remove our energy from lack and to focus on the experience that we want to achieve instead. And that's what we teach around here. So I'm going to move to practicing the principles while you ponder that thought. If you would like to receive today's message and the practicing the principles details, you can sign up for our Mindful Monday email that comes out Monday mornings, which allows you to then take these practices into your life and apply them throughout the week. And this is a practical teaching, so we encourage you to do that. Folks online, you can send me an email and I'll add you to the list. If you're here, you can do so also, or sign up in the lobby. All right, number 1, clean up your stinking thinking. Now, of course, that's a Zig Ziglar statement, right? And he also said that you need to get a checkup from the neck up. And while those are humorous, there's power in those messages that reminds us that it's up to us to clean up our thinking, right? Others can help us and be a mirror for us, but the actual work is within, is it not? To clean up our thinking, to change our thinking. And this week, I'm going to invite you to pay attention to what other people are saying and doing, because it's always easier to hear them than ourselves, isn't it? Yeah. So just listen to other people. Watch things around you. Set an intention to observe and see when they are saying or doing things that are representing lack, that energy of lack. Driving poorly, perhaps, that might come up on somebody's radar. You might hear a conversation. You might see someone doing something. Just watch for those things and then take that in to your own mind and see where you are with it, right? Is this in me? How would I change that thought? How would I change that action and activity so that we can begin to create the new neural pathway in our own mind around a more prosperous and abundant life and begin to unwind that lack thinking? Make sense? Check our judgment or agreement you may have, and remember that my least favorite science of mind quote, if you spot it, you've got it. And it might be that it works to hearing too. I'm not sure. So if you hear it, I don't know, maybe try it this week and see. If you hear somebody say something, anyway, you know where we're going with that. Number 2, tithe your way to riches. This sounds like a cliche. It probably is. It's probably somebody's book title. I don't know, but it just popped in my head. But if you're ready to transform your relationship with money and learn to live as if God really is your source, commit to a tithing practice to Scottsdale Center for Spiritual Living. Beginning today, we have 11 weeks till the end of the year. 11 weeks to play with your money. 11 weeks to play with prosperity. 11 weeks to test the principle. See if it works. See if it works. You would commit to giving 10% of your good to our spiritual center. If you've not already done so, I recommend 10%. It can be net or gross. Edwin Gaines says it should be gross because we want to receive on the higher level also, and not after taxes. But I think it works either way. It's up to you. If 10% is too scary, start at 5. Anybody invested in a 401k plan on the first day? You kind of like, ooh, I'm going to start little. Oh, that didn't hurt. And then you start to bump it up, and the next thing you know, you've got 15% coming out, and it doesn't hurt a bit. Yeah, the same thing happens with this practice. The practice will allow you to experience and explore any limitations you may have. Fear will come up. Oh my gosh. Am I writing this check, really? It did for me, and I bet it will for you. But stay with it. Move through the boundaries. Make peace with your money. Make peace with your finances. I have another invitation. If you'd like to step seriously into this and formalize it, I have a sacred commitment to tithing for you that you can complete and take home. Take one if you'd like, pass it if you don't. You can complete it and take it home and put it on your altar, or you can turn it in and I'll put it on my altar and I will pray with you every day on my prayer list. It's up to you. My already committed tithers, you can do likewise if you would like additional prayer around your prosperity as well. Frankly, I am not concerned about the amount as much as I am the commitment, the spiritual commitment for you for transformation, about staying with it, to commit to yourself to heal and to grow and to expand your own prosperity consciousness. Ernest Holmes explained that perfect love casts out fear. Jesus said, "Fear not, it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." Ernest said, "Fear is the antithesis of faith. It is the negation of confidence. Fear may be conscious or subjective, and if it is to be eliminated, it must be removed from both consciously and subjectively." And that's what this work will do. Consciously, we can talk about it, but until you're in the practice and experiencing the emotion around it, that's when you'll begin to heal the subjective part of it as you move through those emotions and don't let them stop you. All right, it's your turn. What would you like to talk about today around prosperity, tithing? Diane.
About this time 3 years ago, we were doing a Prosperity 2 class here.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a time for me, which I had not tithed really. And I had been going through this victim and loss chapter of my life that I was really heavily invested in. Yeah, so it was interesting to decide whether we were going to tithe this much or that much, just a decision to do it. And then we had a commitment in taking the class to tithe so much. And there is fear. And it's been, here it is 3 years and it works. That's all I have to say. So it's something to look at, and you make the decision what that amount of money is for you. It's not like somebody's going to go check if you're tithing 10%. You know what it is you need to give to feel comfortable and loving and generous about. So, and thank you for that class. That was really a fabulous class. Thanks.
Yeah, we should. We should. Thank you, Diane, for that. Very true. And it is the inner work that is the healing part of it. Yeah, definitely. What else? Carl.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess, well, two comments. First, what you just mentioned a little bit about the giving and receiving versus receiving and giving. There's the great story that about, you walk into a cold cabin and there's a fireplace there, and you walk up to the fireplace waiting for the warmth. And wait a minute, you have to actually put wood in there first before you get the heat. So I was always able to really associate with that because I spent a lot of weekends on, cold farms in West Virginia. But the other thing, it's a question about tithing, which revolves around where do we have options on where we can tithe? Where should we tithe? What are the thoughts and feelings around that?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There are a lot of conversations around that, and Dwayne is a prosperity teacher, Dwayne Gaines, and she teaches that tithing is a separate practice from our donations that we make to charitable organizations, to the pets and the hospitals and all of those sorts of things. That those are a different type of giving, a philanthropy type of giving, as opposed to spiritual practice of tithing. And the purpose of tithing is healing that inner place within us that has challenges around money, fear around money, security issues around money and so forth. If you are tithing here and attending this community and you want to tithe to other centers or other spiritual organizations that you may be involved in, absolutely. It's more about the commitment and the amount. If you're going to do, I'm just use 10% because that's kind of the number. If you use 10% and you're tithing 1% to various spiritual organizations that you participate in, good, great, super.
Thank you. So a lot of times you say time, talent, or treasure.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a difference between tithing money, cash, and giving of your time, giving of your talent, or giving from your wallet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the giving of time, talent, and treasure, that's absolutely what we collect here at the Spiritual Center. It's time, talent, and treasure, right? And I'm grateful for everyone that donates time and talent. That is what makes us go. And the idea of our treasure, though, is the idea, I believe it was Jesus who was talking about locking away our treasures and hoarding our treasures and not circulating our good. And it really comes down to healing that relationship again with the money. And if, well, I'm going to give 40 hours a week to the church and I'm not going to tithe any money, I would really look at that, because there's something going on in the money part of it that, even a small tithe, a 1% tithe, as long as it's consistent and as long as it's in the spiritual mindset, you're giving that, you're circulating that good. So to me, that's the key. Thank you for that question. Yeah. Anyone else? Beverly.
I just had a thought. When I was growing up, I was taught and I remember from age 2 that the way to live is to give 10% and save 10%. And so I grew up in a tithing kind of frame of mind of the 10%, but also in saving 10%. And when we give our time, our treasure, our talents, the underlying theme and the underlying expectation, the underlying experience that I saw was that it's always blessed and multiplied. Whatever you give, it's blessed and multiplied. And then it's returned to you, blessed and multiplied. And that's one of the roots of Science of Mind that has stuck with me all these years, is that think about when you give your talent, your time, and your treasure, you're giving it to lots of people. Even if you're writing a check, you're helping somebody else have a job. And at a grocery store, not only are you helping other people have a job, but all the people that produce the products for you. So your generosity is blessed in many, many, many ways, and it comes back at you, in circulation. That's our basic law, is circulation. And so over time, what I've seen also, and I mentioned savings, that the blessings that are blessed and multiplied back at you from giving your time, talent, and treasures also appears in your savings account over time. And I've been richly rewarded without knowing it as I was growing up and working, that God prepared me for retirement that's been blessed, multiplied over time, and I'm a happy camper.
Thank you, Bev. You guys are such great teachers. I should put you up here instead of me. Anyone else want to share? It's open mic. No? We're good? We're good? Nothing? All right. Very good. Very good.
Well, thank you all for that. I appreciate it. I do appreciate you sharing your wisdom. You enrich us all with that as well, and your testimonies of your own personal tithing. Thank you for that. So let's take it into prayer this morning. What do you think? How good it is that we recognize that there is one power, one presence, one source of all that is, and that source is God. It is the divine. It is the presence. It is the essence. It is abundance and prosperity. It is money. It is good. It is life itself. And it is love and abundance. And that is what has created all that is. And I know that I am an expression of this one power and presence, this one life. I'm an expression of God, individualized and unique. And as I know this for myself, I know it for each one of us gathered here today in the room and online and those listening later. For we are all gathered in the oneness, the wholeness, and the unity of connection, of consciousness, the oneness of God. It doesn't matter if we appear to be separate by time or space. In reality, we are not. We are here, we are present, we are one. And so in that oneness, I speak my word for and about each of us, knowing, claiming, and accepting. On behalf of Scottsdale Center for Spiritual Living, each of us as individuals, that we are collectively, bountifully blessed with all of the flow of good, that we are healed and whole, perfect and complete in our finances, in our relationships, in our health, and in our creative expression. I know that as we step into this practice of tithing, that we do so as a spiritual practice. As we move through life with all of our spiritual practices and principles, recognizing that unity of connection with all things, with all of life, moving us to feel that love and feel that connection and feel that kindness to others as being circulated back to us as kindness to ourselves. And we know our world can use more kindness today. And so I affirm that we are that place where it begins. We are that place of love. So we open our hearts and allow our love to move forth from us to each other, beyond this community, into our state, our country, and our world, illuminating it with our light, with our peace. We just breathe that in this moment. How grateful I am for the manifestation of this prayer, knowing in this moment that the world feels a little bit more loved, a little bit more joy, a little bit more prosperous. With a thankful heart, I release this into the action and activity of law, knowing that it is done and it is so. And we affirm this truth together by saying, and so it is.